for the individual under employment with you, they also have an obligation to file their returns before the 31st of March of the subsequent year. But most people don't do it.
They then ask their employers, oh, I want my tax clearance certificate. You can't get a tax clearance certificate on the basis of the returns filed by your employer, because that is only one line of income. So if people truly want to receive tax clearance certificates, they must disclose all sources of income, even if it is nil.
Welcome to Workplace Whispers with Dr. Olufemi Ogunlowo, where we tackle the most pressing issues in work, business, and human capital. Dr. Ogunlowo is a seasoned HR expert and CEO of Strategic Outsourcing Limited. He has spent decades navigating workforce management. Well, today we're discussing a very crucial topic: taxation. Well, now, of course, we know that filing tax returns can be tricky and mistakes come at a cost. But to help break it down, we're joined by Akinyele Oladeji, the CEO of CSDC Consulting and a global revenue automation expert with 30 plus years of experience. Now, on this episode, we will unpack tax obligations, common pitfalls, and compliance strategies. I'm Praise Mba. Welcome to Workplace Whispers.
Let's go.
Okay, let's go. We're talking about taxation, Dr. Ogunlowo. Let's start from the basics. Taxation. You have a vast network. You've, led thousands of workforce over the years. What would you say is one of the mistakes that, companies, employees, people make when it comes to filing tax returns?
Thank you, Praise. And I think we must make a distinction on the entity. So first, the employer is an entity, and the employee is a separate entity. But what we've seen over the years, including in SOL, is that a lot of employees mistake the obligation of the employer to file their annual tax returns from income from employment as the terminal return that is required. But that's not the case. The law requires the individual to file his or her personal tax returns by 31st of March, whereas the employer is required to file by the 31st of January. And so, a lot of employees do not file their personal returns, and in return, they miss on the kind of benefits they could get. And I think this might be something that, will be interesting for you to share.
Let's talk about like laymen now.
Okay.
Whenever you don't know the purpose of anything, it is very susceptible to abuse, and compliance is made a little more difficult. And that is why, maybe as a threshold matter, we should first say that in Nigeria, based on our laws, we have 3 federating units, and that means 3 taxing authorities. And every business and individual has obligations to all those 3 taxing authorities. Once you know those obligations, as a company now, your corporate income tax, that is taxes on your profits, is paid, and you have an obligation to file returns to the federal government on that one. As an individual, your personal income taxes fall under the line of sight of state internal revenue services, where you have obligations as both an employee, everything personal income, and the employer of labor in that regard. And certain revenue also fall under the line of sight of local governments, like the people working in garages and the rest of it. They check off loading dues and everything, signages and everything. But I think for the purpose of this, our discussion is actually we are looking at the obligations for filing returns with the state and federal government.
And I think that, to help our listeners out there, the individual liabilities that comes with not filing returns is sometimes unknown. People don't know that they actually face the risk of 50,000 naira penalty for not filing returns, and that there is actually a statute of limitation of 6 years, which means you have probably 300,000 naira penalty if the State Board of Internal Revenue actually takes the list of employees that have been filed by the various companies and come after them.
I know you have a lot of problems in your hand.
No, I
It
wouldn't
is-
have problems.
I'm saying that
Application of the employee.
the society would have a lot of problems because it is not the intendment of any tax law to kill the goose that lay the golden egg. So we will just encourage government for this tax. It's an obligation. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse. So if the state government decides to go that route, they will have a lot of money to collect. But then, is it the intendment of the law to kill the goose that lays the golden egg?
Absolutely
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
But
yeah, and-
what is it that the employee loses by not complying with this provision that requires them to file personal returns?
Oh, well, look at it from this way. I think we should disaggregate it a little. Number one, you will see the people who will actually be affected, where the state government will actually have money, not refunds, are the high net worth individuals. Really, that is where the people who are actually the former of the informer or the informer of the former. I will break that down a little. When we look at people in employment now, you have an organization. You are seen as the collection agent of the government. There's an obligation imposed on you to deduct taxes before you pay people. We can look at these returns under the polarity of their personal income, salaries you pay them. When you give contracts out to under withholding taxes, you have an obligation, and the rest of it to file. And you have started mentioning the dates anyway. For the company, we look at it from the perspective of Form H1. That is for the preceding year, before the 31st of January of the subsequent year of the current year, you must file the returns concerning everybody you employed. Salaries paid out under a prescribed form that will show the income, the deductions, the taxes, which is an annual thing. Some employee will come in between and the rest of it, so it is an annual card and you file it. For the individual under employment with you, they also have an obligation to file their returns before the 31st of March of the subsequent year. But most people don't do it.
And that begs the question.
Most people don't do it.
Yes, most people don't do it, but they then ask their employers, oh, I want my tax clearance certificate. You can't get a tax clearance certificate on the basis of the returns filed by your employer, because that is only one line of income. So if people truly want to receive tax clearance certificates, they must disclose all sources of income, even if it is nil.
I think you are taking it stricto sensu.
Okay?
Number one thing is this. The law imposes a civic duty on you, and that is the payment of your taxes. The adequacy of that is a secondary matter, and that is why we have so many remedies on the side of government too. You can go back 6 years tax audit, you can be investigated, you can be invited to come and do whatever. But once you have paid that taxes, no matter how inadequate, the issuance of tax clearance to you becomes your civic right. So they cannot withhold. Based on you have not filed this, you have not filed that. Once you are, because for you to request, you have actually declared your employment income, and that is one source of income. It is enough for you to have it so you can carry on your businesses. Okay. Because tax clearance, demand for tax clearance now becomes a requirement for transacting businesses.
So what's the clearance there?
And that is why they now impose penalty for not filing. There's already a penalty. So you have exposed yourself to the payment of that 50,000 naira, which is the that I didn't file on time. At the point of request for tax clearance certificate, they can now force it upon you that go and file all your returns, which will be there anyway. Because in the form A that you will fill, which is a prescribed form, other sources of income are there, and that is a form of return.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question therefore is this. An employee comes to HR and says, I want my tax clearance certificate. Is it the obligation of the employer to process tax clearance certificate for the employee?
Well, in a way, he's the one who has deducted, who will file on his behalf to the Internal Revenue Service. And if the Internal Revenue Service require more information, they can pass it through.
Okay, but my understanding is that tax is personal. The employer is just a collecting agent. Therefore, to process personal income tax certificate is outside the realm of the responsibility of the employer, and it is actually squarely on the laps of the employee, to the extent that he is the one who has his personal tax ID, who would make determination on other sources of income, because the tax clearance certificate will capture the income from all sources. In fact, by the definition of the law, is global income.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and but then indulge me to be a little biblical here. Apostle Paul says something, that the fact that something is legal, is it expedient? An organization may have, let's say, 1,000, 5,000. We know so many people, so many organizations in excess of that. Don't you think that it will be cumbersome that all these people we just approach individually? Look at it, man hour. That's why I'm saying that the test of legality is one thing. Expediency is another thing. Would it be expedience? And that is why we use this in taxation in practice.
Exactly.
28 parallel rule.
Now you are wearing the cap of a practitioner on the side of government now, which means collecting and finding ease for government. But the issue is this: if we want to tackle this and make people more compliant, people must understand their responsibilities and liabilities, and civic duties to the state.
There are various mitigating ways, factors and everything, and that is what triggers audit, that is what triggers investigation, that is what triggers a lot of and there are so many roadblocks to toll gates that the government has put in place. And that's why you have the obligation to register. That's why you have TIN number for organizations. That is why you have payers ID that brings this thing into your own portal, that is how much you have paid. When government sees there is a discrepancy between whatever you have filed, they come after you individually.
Okay. So
if you have collected rent, for instance, now, and the landlord has taken withholding tax for you, and he has filed on your behalf, you think the government will just say, because you understand what I'm saying?
I would say maybe we'll park that side, because if we start to go into withholding tax, because the individual does not have the capability to collect withholding tax on rent from another individual, because that individual is not operating the pay-as-you-earn scheme. So let's park that. For me, the reason why this is very important is that a lot of employees out there are not getting the benefit of taxation because they are not filing their returns, and they cannot even enjoy the rebates that are there.
I know that is where you are going.
Exactly. I want my employees to be able to enjoy the rebates.
So they file it. Well, I'm not saying they shouldn't file. I'm just looking at it, stricto sensu, that they have an obligation to file. But in applying for tax clearance certificates, I'm saying that while you can go yourself, your company can also apply on your behalf.
That can, but you can't impose on the employer the liability that the law does not put on him. As an employer of labor, we want to be efficient, we want to be effective, but we also want our employees to actually fulfill their civic obligations and responsibilities to the state. And I think that we should have a consensus of opinion that we should educate and encourage our employees to file their returns by 31st of March so that they can get the benefits associated with filing.
I agree with you on that, stricto sensu. And that is why we are saying that a lot of enlightenment, education and everything. And you will see, even for instance, I know that we live in Lagos, and the government goes, all the government employees now in Lagos State Service, they are forced, all the agencies of government, they are encouraged, let me not use the word forced, to file their returns before the 31st of March. Individually, they go there, even you will see the Internal Revenue Service staff going into those organizations and encouraging them that this is the way from AEs and everything. And some of them actually get rebates that you said.
Absolutely. So
I'm just saying that, okay, that is the topic. That
the pay-as-you-earn is not necessarily the terminal tax for an individual, because an individual may have other sources of income, and losses could also come from some of those sources, which then means that the totality of their taxation, which is supposed to be on their income. And by the way, we must make that distinction that pay as you earn is under regulation, which is basically equal installments based on expected employment income that is then spread over a 12-month period. Whereas you could have bullet income, you could have allowances, you could have bonuses, you could have all sorts of other things that are paid. You could earn commission by helping somebody sell a car. You could earn commission by getting, a trade on one platform or the other. So the employee has to know that they can actually get some form of rebate from government, because I believe, and I'm not exactly saying this, that there's a 1%, that one could benefit also in terms of reduction in taxes by even filing on time.
Well, like you have said, one thing is very clear, and the Form A is very exact about it. Employment income is one, but I'm telling you that this is much more relevant for high net worth individuals, people, employers and labor, and the rest of them who have several sources of income. The majority that we are speaking to of employee only, and their employment contract actually forbids other sources of income.
Yeah, but people do farming.
Yeah, I know that is subsistence farming, and that is even on the. It depends on your contract of employment. So many people, it's not every contract of employment that is that negates other sources of income or practices if it does not affect or whatever. But when we are talking of the civil service rules and regulation, that you can only engage in subsistence farming for yourself. But so many other things, so many other contracts now, like my own staff now, they can do some other things once it is not conflicting, if there's no conflict of interest or something like that. Under that kind of arrangement, you have a duty, because all income are liable to taxation. Every source of income, and if you see the design of the Form A, the return that you will file with government, it shows columns are there for rental income, every other kind of sources of income. You could have done consultancy for somebody which does not conflict with your regular 9-to-5 job. You have a duty to file it, and you get all the reliefs and everything. So every employee, let's say it the way it is, every employee, every individual, every taxable adult has a duty under our law to file their returns before the 31st of March.
Even if it is nil,
you have a duty to file it.
Absolutely. And in filing it, you could also get rebate by filing on time. Praise, I think...
I've been here, it's too much to learn here. I'm going to continue with what was said earlier. All income is liable to taxation. But still talking about personal income tax because of the purpose of information and education here. And can we help clarify the tax obligations for paying employees versus self-employed people? Does this also affect freelancers, self-employed people as well?
I mean, that question should go to you directly. But let me just quickly mention this because of the fact that we have different categories of employees, and that's instructive. In the business that we do, we provide third-party staff to organizations, and some of these staff are on salary, some of them are on piece rate employment, which is they earn based on what they perform. So we must make distinction between payee, which is pay as you earn, which by regulation is equal installment of annualized income. And so, for instance, if you have a staff that works in an agency where they do commission for rental income, you can't place that person on payee because he doesn't have a fixed income. So and that's why I will say that it's very important that we clarify that payee is not the only form of personal income tax. And then I'll let him actually delve into the various forms.
Well, when you are talking about personal income tax, there are two. You can look at them under two major polarities, and that is the employment income, that is the salaried income, and that is what goes under the pay-as-you-earn scheme. It's a kind of avoidance, anti-avoidance scheme of government that once you earn your income, the obligation, the law places a duty on your employer as the collection agent of government before you earn that income, before you receive that income. that a certain percentage based on the prescribed rates should be deducted for government. You are giving allowances. The other aspect that we call direct assessment or self-assessment, now loosely or some, are the ones who are in employment, who are the owners of the businesses, who are self-employed, who are sole entrepreneurs, and that can come under various professionals, can come under it, lawyers, accountants, and the rest of it can come under them. Once you look at it from that one, from your employment income, your taxes are deducted before you even receive the income. That is on one side. For the other people, and that is on a monthly basis, as you earn it, it's deducted, and that is pay as you earn the income. But for the other ones, you have obligations to file quarterly with government such that it does not become cumbersome to you. And that places that responsibility on you, the owner of the business, to say, okay, from January to March, I made so and so amount of money, and this is my obligation, this is the income I've made, this is my expenses. You file your expenses, you need accurate record keeping, and you file with government. That is another thing. But there are times when the lines are not so straight and they are blurred. And that is when you have employment income, like doctors now working in hospitals, doing freelance. I think they call it locum or something of that nature. A pharmacist who has his private business pharmacy and his employment contract does not preclude him. Even you have employees doing some other businesses, selling recharge card in the office. You understand what I'm saying? Who have several sources of income. They have obligation because that income, the government now, the tax authorities have a way of looking at all your incomes together. Governments now can see your bank accounts. They can look at your expenditure pattern. We have so many young girls now. There's no time you open your WhatsApp and look at the status, and you won't see somebody selling one thing or the other.
The hustle is real, basically.
And that's maybe we should talk a little, because I said it earlier on as a threshold matter, that once you don't know the purpose of a thing, it's susceptible to abuse. And that is why government has a duty now to educate people. You see, let us look back at the origin of society itself. It is not because people in Nigeria don't pay taxes. We only pay a lot of black taxes to non-state actors. But when you look at actual amounts of money that comes out of people's pocket to compulsory payment to non-state actors, look at the instance of the bus drivers. They pay by force. And that is to non-state actors most of the times. So many people under the informal whatever. So let's leave that, because that's another topic that does not count. But then, once you understand that, look at it in the origin of society itself. Social contract theory. Thomas Hobbes says something that in the state of nature, life was short, nasty, and brutish. And might was right. If I can beat doctor, I feel like I can beat him. I can take all his assets. I can take all his assets and everything.
Absolutely.
But reasonable men now came together that we can't continue living like this. We must submit that individual sovereignty, that individual liberty that God gave us, such that we won't go the way of the dinosaur to go into a state. And everybody will now submit it to a constituted authority, and that constituted authority will make laws for us. To demonstrate that submission, you must release. Like, now there's no organization that can survive without a compulsory kind of levy. Whether in church, they call it tithes. Whether you are a lawyer, you pay to MBA or something, because they need money to fund it. And that society needs money to fund. So if you are an adult, your right, your claim to living in any modern society is actually the payment of those taxes. So once you understand that, compliance will make it a lot easier. And you cannot put the weight of the society on just a few. It is the doom of all of us. So when we pull this money together, because there are certain things you cannot provide for yourself, and that is the business of government. You can't provide security for yourself now. You can't provide roads for yourself. So they look at programs for the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people, and that is what government spend money on. So now, once you understand that civic obligation to government, that is your right to live in the society, I think compliance is really, and that is why I like it when you said that education, enlightenment is very, very key to tax compliance. Absolutely. And once you know your right. Now, looking at it from that, everybody now on WhatsApp thinks they are cutting corners, doing business there, not filing and paying on it. It is what? Now you will now go back on that same WhatsApp and start complaining that government has not done the road to your house, that security, they are kidnapping or something. Where do you expect them to find the money?
Yeah, I guess.
You understand what I'm saying? So we have a duty. So let's now, to bring it back to what we are saying. When you are in employment, that is one source of employment. It is not sufficient for you. You have a responsibility to declare all the other sources of. So if you are a pharmacist working in an hospital and you think you have paid your taxes, you have not done well. All the other places where you do locum, you should file the return of those income and let's now apply the rates based on those. If you are a lecturer freelancing in about 4 other private universities and your employment, you have not paid your taxes. All those other sources of income that are paid to you directly or you have made directly. If you have rental income, you have some other businesses you have inherited that you oversee or something of that nature. If you are a director and you collect allowances, director in so many other organizations, and you have collected allowances, you have a duty. The rates are there. Even if you have sitting allowance, you have a duty to file that return before the 31st of March with government. And if you are now in business as an entrepreneur, don't wait till the end of the year. The law prescribes that quarterly file those returns so that it does not become cumbersome, because nobody keeps tax money on the side.
Absolutely.
So
what else would you want us to talk about?
Absolutely. I think that pretty much sums it up entirely. But as we begin to wind down, what is that one single piece of advice that you think is most important for people to know now, companies to know about when it comes to tax compliance?
Well, I will always wear the cap of an employer. And so I would always say that the distinction between the employer's obligation as a collecting agent and the employee's obligation to file their returns should be there, and we must continue to encourage all our employees to know that even if you do not have income from other sources, you have the obligation to file your returns by 31st of March such that you can benefit from the opportunities that are prescribed in the various acts. And of course, to also remind our employees that even when you have filed through your employer cannot process refunds for you where you have overpaid due to so many factors that can happen. And so for you to be able to enjoy that, you just need to step up and do what only you can do.
100% on what you have said. And the employee has, and that's why we say tax matters are personal liability matters. The employer has fulfilled his own obligation by deducting those taxes from you. But you don't even know the amount, apart from consolidated reliefs, the amount of opportunities that are there in the tax laws for you as a person. Other than, just don't look at it that government is taking money. That is number one. So for individuals and companies, I think the first thing is to first let the tax authority know that you exist. And the first step is by making sure that you are properly registered. The company collects a tax identification number through that registration. That's the first step that will make compliance easy for them. For every individual, you must have a unique identifier which is called payer ID. Once that, any money now that is now paid for you on your behalf goes into your portal, which makes it easy for you to claim rights, to know the amount of money that has been paid on your behalf. So many people now, they do businesses, they do contracts and everything, and withholding taxes have been paid on their behalf to government, but it doesn't even enter their covers to offset their tax liability. So that's first step. Number two, it is incumbent upon you to make sure that you know all the deadlines, the timelines. For employers of labor now, know that you must file your H1 before the 31st. For individuals, employees, and owners of businesses, under your personal income tax, you have a duty before the 31st of March to go and file. Now, what is most important again is accurate record keeping. Most people don't keep records. And our law says the government can request from you as far back as 6 years record. You can't blame anybody. It is your obligation to make sure you have record of your income and record of your expenses. It is important. And we can go on and on and on and on and on and on.
Say a big thank you actually for coming on this show today. And Praise, thank you always for anchoring.
Thank you very much, sir.
And we'll see you on the next edition of Whispers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.